Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited about this episode because it's August. It's time to go back to school, and I have the perfect guest for today's episode. Joining us today is Belinda Howell, a very passionate advocate for transforming classrooms through blended learning and gamification. She's board recognized. Her board recognized strategies at Aldine and Spring ISD proof tech isn't just a tool, but it's a game changer for engagement. So I want everyone to give a warm welcome to Belinda. Hi.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you so much for being here. I know you are super busy, always very involved with the community and different conferences. So I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, it's that time of the year. Everything's starting to just heat up and get real busy.
I know. Well, let's break the ice. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do currently, how you ended up, like an expert for gamification and blended strategies.
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Belinda Howell. I'm currently a digital learning specialist at Aldine ISD. Before that, I worked at Spring ISD as an eighth grade U.S. history teacher. And one of my things is I'm a gamer. So when I started teaching U.S. history, I saw the kids were just so bored by just lecture and worksheets. I'm like, we got to bring some type of gamification in. So I'd always be looking for ways to do choose your own adventures, even in like Google Forms or other type of game based activities. I always loved like GimKit. That was like one of my favorites. And then when I found Genially, that's where I kind of just fell in love, especially with the escape rooms. That's just I really enjoy making them and then just watching the kids kind of go through them because I can see their reactions, especially if I had like multiple endings. And sometimes
Yes,
I'd show the kids how to do it, and that's even more fun is to see them create something and just
for
see
sure.
their creativity. So I mean that's always been my big thing is I like engagement, I like gamification. I want learning to be fun. And so that's kind of what I've always been interested in. And like when I with Genially, that's where I've always just loved it. And I just wanted to share that love with the teachers. So I love to go to conferences and share strategies for how you can really get people involved, more interested in learning. And it shouldn't be just boring slides just nonstop. The kids, even adults, they don't want that. They want some engagement. That's how we're going to get learning. So yeah, that's kind of just how it brought me here.
For sure. And I mean, I think for a lot of teachers and instructional designers, adding interactive elements is still kind of new.
Hmm.
And I want you to tell me what's, in your opinion, of course, and one outdated best practice that we still use and see a lot in courses and in lessons, even though it's not really working. It's killing engagement and maybe shouldn't be here in 2025.
Well, the one thing I see all the time is just the idea that if it's important, it needs to be on the slide. And that's where we get massive text dumps. It's not really considered a best practice, though, but it's just something I see teachers just sticking to. If I was going to think of a best practice, it would be the idea of using completion rates as a metric for success. Because I see some instructional designers, they like to set it up so that the teacher's got to click this, go through all the slides, got to click every button, got to open every video, got to complete everything. And success is if you get them to do all of that. And I don't really agree with that. That's just more tedious. I mean, if they're just clicking, that's just passive learning. So I think that's what we kind of got to go away from for using that metric that just complete all these activities, just engage with it once, and that means it's successful. I think we should be prioritizing metrics like application or performance improvement or sustained engagement just to be able to show what's successful.
For sure. And in that same, kind of same topic,
Uh-huh.
what's one cringe-worthy interactive element that you still see in courses or modules?
Well, sometimes I see they want to have all that text in there and they try to hide it by having everything interactive. Like you click this button and it reveals some text, and then you click another one and it reveals text, and it's like everything is. Now, I like reveals and engagement, but I want it certain parts. Like you got something that's a very key statistic or something you want to stick in their mind, that's something they click and it reveals and it sticks in their mind. But when you get these courses where it's just like they just have to keep clicking all these buttons to pull out the text, it just feels kind of tedious, and I think it just more passive learning, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes it's not about the amount of interactivity that you add, but how
Mhm.
intentional you are about them.
That's the big thing is it needs to be relevant. It needs to
Yeah,
feel relevant and not just a chore.
for sure. And sometimes I think LMS limitations are our go-to excuse for boring design sometimes and for not adding interactivity. But what's one thing that you can build today that bypasses those restrictions?
And I've heard that a lot from like all the people I know who use various LMSs, that it doesn't always have much interactivity. But the thing is you can build something outside of the LMS and just embed it. So, for instance, I've been trying to show some eighth grade U.S. history teachers how we can take a Genially, we add a map, we add like with colonies or states, and we make interactivity for the kids to kind of practice with knowing which is which, or maybe lead to a game. We build that all in Genially, or maybe other products, and then you can make it engaging, you can make it fun, and then you just embed it in your LMS. I've done that in Schoology. I've done it in Canvas. I mean, anything that you're doing, I mean, you go find something that's just more exciting and then just embed it in there. That way you can get around that boringness, but still keep all the metrics with the LMS.
And when you mean embedding, you are usually use the iframe or do you use links? Uh,
You, it kind of depends on the LMS because some of them, and it kind of depends what you're linking. Some things you can embed, like iframe, and sometimes you just put it in as a link. It kind of depends on which activity you're doing and which LMS. Because some of them, like with Schoology pages, you can embed a lot more in it. And I know Canvas was able to as well. But some of the other ones, you might just have to put a link and they click on it to go outside of Schoology, and that still does the same
okay.
features.
You talked about having heavy content on like slides and having a lot of text. And subject matter
Mm-hmm.
experts usually push for those content heavy lessons. How do
Yes.
you push back? Of course, using data to show that less content and more interaction leads to better retention.
Yeah, I get this a lot because again, a lot of them think if it's important, it needs to be written down, and that just leads to this content dump. But what I like to bring up is, and I don't make sure I can pronounce this, it's the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So it will show that content dumps where they're just getting all this information and there's no reinforcement, no going back for engagement. They're going to forget everything. Well, about
Yeah.
90% is what the theory shows, 90% within a week. So you show them stats on that. Then you go over and you show them like a nice micro learning course that was created that has some engagement built in, where they're having some repetition, they're having a variety of activities where they're doing the similar information but they're doing the different ways, and they're having that repetition, and you're going to see, I mean, and I can show the retention is going to be increased by like up to 80%. And I've seen this even as a teacher, because when I was in eighth grade, sometimes the curriculum was so strict that it was like we had to do a different lesson every day, and we never had time to go
For
back
sure.
and
Yeah.
review. And those kids, they're of course they're going to forget it right away. But when we started kind of cycling back and putting more activities where they're doing more repetition and practicing, and even if it's just a quiz or a test or anything, as long as they're engaging with that activity again, they're more likely to remember it. And especially when it's chunked, it's just going to be something that it's going to be better for them to learn. They won't have that cognitive overload. And that's kind of what I like to show them, is that it just, the data really shows if you're just giving them this huge dump, they're going to forget 90% of it within a week. But if you break it down into chunked interactive material that they're
Okay.
kind of getting repetitively, they're going to, statistically, it's just going to go up remarkably.
So then, in your opinion, repetition is a lot more important
Mhm.
than just adding all the content at once.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you can see this with kids or adults. Because I mentioned, like, with kids, I saw it immediately. You just give it to them. If they hear it once, it goes in the ear, out the other ear. But same with teachers. Like, it's same with adults. Same any career, whether it's education or out in the private sector. If they just hear it once and they don't get it actually practice it, it's going to be forgotten and
Yeah,
forever.
for sure.
Just a week, it's gone. So that's why you need that repetition. And like going back to that one example where I mentioned with the maps, that one of the hardest things when I taught eighth grade was maps because they don't really get many map training, many geography, right? So if you just give them a map, they look at it once. We expect them, okay, you know where all the colonies are, you know all the geography, you know the oceans, and then we're always shocked when the test comes and we see that one day where they were looking at that information and they retained nothing. But you bring something where it's like with that one activity where it's just them constantly practicing it, that engaging material. They're, constantly repeating it and they're just going over a variety of activities. It just jumps up how much they
Yeah,
remember.
I totally agree. Repetition is key. And also like adding different interactions, right? If you're seeing it in a map first, then maybe a
Yeah.
multiple question later, and then a video.
Or a label. Yep. Or even a game. Like I said, I love doing the games because, when it's fun, that's when they're most likely to remember. It's either got to be relevant or fun or hopefully both.
Completely agree. In your opinion, what's one thing that instructional designers are secretly afraid to admit uh, that they don't know, but really should know by now?
Honestly, a lot of them don't know how to write for the courses or for the web. And I don't think a lot of them want to admit it because they know how to write. And they know how to write for, their subject matter experts. They know about their content, but they don't know how to write it in a way that'll make
Mhm.
sense for their users. Whether that's, eighth grade students or whether that's adults learning something in a different career, it's got to be written without the useless jargon. It's got to be in a way that makes sense to them. And I think a lot of them just need to practice that. I know I
What would
have.
you recommend to overcome this?
I think it's going to be doing a lot of discussions with your users to kind of get feedback from what they see. Like I finished a master's at Western Governors, and part of the capstone was going and creating a module. And of course, we had to go and watch the students as they were doing it to see what their visual reactions was, they were saying. And I found, even for me, when they were reading it, I saw some of them got confused because they didn't understand some of the language. How I wrote, like what made sense to me, didn't necessarily make sense to someone
Yeah.
who was 13. So sometimes I think it's talking with them, and it's also maybe watching when they're actually doing it, see what their reactions, see where they're confused. So yeah, I think it's spending a lot of time with like the end user to see kind of what their reactions and what they say, what makes sense to them.
And I know you are super creative because I've seen some of your creations in Genially and all the materials that you create. So I want to have this a scenario where if you had to transform, you had 24 hours to transform a boring presentation or lesson. Where would you start and what would you do?
Well, first, I always like to put it in Genially Live because first they're in it, right? You can control the page, but then you can add all kinds of interactivity where they're involved. And that for me is the big difference. If you're just sitting there listening to a lecture, you're going to tune out. But you add in that interactivity, there's questions, there's polls, there's little mapping things to get them involved. That one is going to first just get them more interested. Secondly, I like to just make sure it's kind of relevant and engaging. So sometimes I might have it story based. Like, are they solving a problem? Are they answering some type of issue? Or is there some type of narrative? Some transformation. It kind of goes back to just making it relevant. So, but I liked definitely with Genially Live just that interactivity. But yeah, I think it's the big one is just keeping them involved. And one, of course, getting rid of all the walls of text because no one has time for that. They're just going to tune that out. I like to add some interactivity and sometimes some games and choices, like scenario based uh, events. I kind of like that because when people see they have a
Yeah.
choice and they click on it and they see the response, I think it just kind of gets them more
Yeah, for
interested.
sure. I think storytelling and having them have the choice to select the path that they want to take will definitely retain their
Mm-hmm.
attention. And, I think it's also important to highlight this one because in some districts or some states, students are not allowed to have their
Mm.
phones, right? So even though we loved
Oh, yeah.
Genially Live and it's super engaging, I think in some states they cannot use it unless they have a laptop or an iPad, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like another great way could be what you're saying, scenario based modules or lessons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, Texas is one of those states, so we're going to see how the kids respond. But yeah, they all have Chromebooks. They can just connect, and if they're part of it, that's when you're going to kind of get them involved. They don't want to just sit there and listen to someone talk to them. They kind of want to be part of it. And I really found like the features of just getting them involved, like with questions or polls, their ideas that facilitates discussion that we can have in the class, as well as through the Genially. I also love little widgets, just occasional ones. Press there, it just can kind of break up some
Yeah,
monotony, get some discussion going, especially like with photos. Again, I'm a history person, so I'm always about we got to make sure it's layered so they can see all this rich pictures.
love that. All right, and kind of the same line of question. What are three like very simple, stupid, simple interactivity upgrades any instructional designer can create in under 15 minutes? Just your top three.
Okay. Oh man, there's so many. Well, okay, we just mentioned the branching scenario. I always like that. Whether it's kids or adults, I always feel like people feel a lot more involved when there's some type of branching scenario. What would you do? And they click there, and maybe they get a little response to that. It gives that mystery. Like, I don't know if you remember this. We used to have this series called Choose Your Own Adventures. They were this book series. I fell in love with them as a kid, and I kind of like that concept when I'm making courses or content. There's not always just one answer. It's like maybe what
Yeah.
happens if you go here? What if you go there? So one of them would be, yeah, create some type of branching scenarios where they get some feedback. Another one is kind of drag and drop. Like sometimes I'll make something like I did this in one of my eighth grade ones where it was like the three regions, and I had characteristics of each of the regions and like pictures or descriptions, and they had to kind of just drag and drop. It only took me a couple minutes to do, but every time I see the kids do it, they seem to like it. And another one, and this is another one I really like, is just make an interactive image. Like there was one famous painting of the Declaration of Independence when all the signers were there, and I always had questions like who everyone was. They'd always ask me that, but not many people have like all of
Of
them
course.
memorized. So I made an interactive image where I put it for every individual so they could hover over every guy and see their name, where they came from,
That's
what
awesome.
colony they're representing. You could click it to pull up more information. I love that part, and I've been able to do that in multiple subjects, and as well as for adults. I think that just brings some more of that intrigue that you can make any part of that image something where they can
I
pull
feel like that's
information.
also
And
really good
yeah,
for blended learning, right? Like if you're at home and
mhm.
you're just exploring one uh, picture. Also, it's so helpful.
Yes, you can build so much into one. I mean, again, it comes back to less is more. Instead of having a slide deck that's over 100, and I've had one in one professional development session, the slide deck was over 100 slides. You know how many people immediately turned off just seeing how long it was? Then I go make something in like Genially, and it's only like 3, but I just have so much interactivity embedded in there that it doesn't
Yeah,
scare them away, but it
you
keeps
layer
them
the
interested, you
information
know?
in a way that it's clear, interactive, and that doesn't overwhelm the person who's seeing it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's awesome. All right. Just to end this interview, Um,
Mm.
as instructional designers, learning specialists, teachers, kind of head to the new school year, what advice would you give them to start strong and stay innovative? Try to kind of change the old materials and start doing something different in this school year.
I love that question. I mean, I think the focus would be to embrace experimentation and iteration. Because, a lot of times we just want to stick to what we know, but sometimes you just got to jump out there and try new things. Don't be afraid to iterate, constantly be trying new stuff. And it's not all always going to work. There's going to be things that just fail hard, but we learn a lot from the things that don't work. We see what doesn't work and we make it better. So I think part of it is just go and explore new ideas and just try it out. Get feedback from, whoever your end users are, because I believe talking with them to see what they're interested in is
For
vital
sure.
for any instructional designer. But the big one is just, experiment and iterate. Don't just stop with the first thing. You can always explore. I mean, that was something I did with the escape games. At first, I always started with just, the templates because they're amazing. But then I'm like, I'm going to go try to do some other stuff. And I just start making more and more. And, some of it was weird, but it teaches me a lot more too. And I kind of think that's just the idea of instructional design is you got to go out
Yeah.
there and just try things, to iterate and just try. Another one is to reach out and build your professional learning network. Reach out to each other like this, the part of your network, or, there's all kinds of other networks on, Twitter or X, and like Reddit and TCEA and ITSY. There's all these communities that you can join and talk with each other, see what everyone else is doing, and that can really inspire ideas. Because sometimes you might be iterating and coming up with all these ideas, but then you go see some colleague do something, and you're like, I've never thought
Yeah.
about doing that. So I kind of think it's both. It's a little bit of experiment, iterate, and of course expand your professional network and learn
Yeah,
from
for
each
sure.
other.
I mean, the first time we try is never gonna be perfect, right? But we will improve
Correct.
as we practice. And what you say about community is also so important. Having a community that supports you, that kind of gives you new ideas. It's really helpful if you're trying to kind of do things different, not stay in your the same box.
Yep. Same box, exactly. You gotta reach
What
out a
others
bit.
are doing. Yeah. Well, Belinda, thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much for all your comments, all your answers, for sharing your wisdom with us. Uh,
Well, thank you for
yeah,
having me
thank you for your
on.
time. And for everyone, thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you next time in September.